Hey everybody, we got exciting news today because we're finally back on the Roadster pickup. I'm terrified to see what this thing looks like. It's been sitting outside for over 3 months now. It was in the shop until I started doing the Cummins conversion on my crew cab, and it got pushed outside during that. The whole time it's been sitting out here under a tarp during the rain season, and like we're 2 blocks from the ocean, so oh man, I hope it's not destroyed, but let's take a look. So it held up considerably better than I was expecting. I thought all of this would be orange and crusty for sure, but it's fine considering it was like I didn't spray it with Gibbs or penetrating oil or anything. It was just like raw steel pushed outside with a tarp over it. Anyways, this is the Third Wave Roadster. Now, I've had a lot of videos on stuff I've done for this car, like the dropped axle, the split wishbones, the AV8 mounts, shock mounts, stuff like that, but I've never actually talked about the car before. So, Third Wave Roadster, why is it called the Third Wave Roadster? Well, I'm a huge music fan, and everybody, well, not everybody, but music fans, at least punk fans, know about Third Wave Ska, the third generation of ska music. So, not the best form of ska music, but that's not the point. The reason I named this the Third Wave Roadster is if you go back to the beginning of hot rodding's first heyday in like the 40s, 50s, and 60s when hot rods thrived. In my opinion, that was like the best time in hot rodding. Then it kind of got weird when the muscle car came out. People started, like hot rods kind of went to the wayside because people could just go down to the factory and to the dealership and buy like a brand new Camaro that would blow the doors off these cars. And you didn't need any like skill or ingenuity or like mechanical ability to do that. All you needed was like good credit. Maybe your parents could co-sign the loan for you, and boom, you were on the racetrack going. So hot rods kind of died off then. They started moving towards the street rod side of things, where like rod runs became a thing. More show car stuff. They started being built more for comfort rather than speed. That I'm not super into. Come along about 30 years later, in the mid-90s, is kind of when the second wave of hot rodding began. That's when car clubs like the Burbank Choppers, the Shifters, the Road Devils, clubs like that, they were all a bunch of young guys in their 20s, and they started kind of recreating 50s, 60s, 40s style early hot rods. And it was pretty easy then, because a lot of these parts, they were still around, but because nobody wanted them, they could be obtained at swap meets for very cheap. That's about the time I started getting into hot rods. In the early 2000s, I lived in Bakersfield and managed to hook up with a really cool crowd. I hung out with Gary Maxwell and Squeak Bell, the Autoholics, a bunch of those like early second wave hot rod enthusiasts, and that's what really got me into it. So I was in my early 20s then, so like I kind of fell right into the mecca of the whole like traditional hot rod revival, and I loved it. It was amazing, incredible. It's what my entire life has kind of been based on since then. So about late maybe 2010 to 2012, the second wave of traditional hot rodding kind of started to die off. A couple reasons it did that. Parts were starting to get crazy expensive. All of a sudden, all these old hot rod parts, all this kind of stuff, they started becoming cool. And a lot of the early builders of the second wave, they were now getting to the point where they had a bit of disposable income, so they could afford to pay those prices. And it kind of drove the price of early Fords and hot rods too high. in my opinion. It was too high. So the people started selling them off. It got too expensive for like young car enthusiasts to get into. A lot of them sold their hot rod projects and started getting into choppers and boogie vans and so on and so forth. So I started this project with the idea of, I don't want to build like a 50s or 60s period correct hot rod with this. Not that, like, I really appreciate that stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that I really like to do, but it's too expensive. So I decided to go back to when I first got into hot rods, what was cool then, and that was in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when there was a lot of real low dollar, low buck, home built hot rods. So that's what this car is kind of focusing on. For example, I built the frame. It's not a Model A frame. It's just a frame that I built out of tubing. Actually, I don't know if you guys ever saw the video on the front engine dragster I built, but these frame rails, that was the chassis table that I built the dragster on. So I repurposed it into a frame. I built these Model A frame horns just out of flat plate. Dropped axle, and you guys have probably all seen the video on how I dropped that axle. The rear end it's nothing special, it's nothing cool, it's just a 52 Ford truck rear end. The reason I'm using it was free, and it had good brakes that worked. I had the drive shaft that worked with it. It was a no-brainer. I built all the brackets. It's just a Model T spring in the back. I think I paid $10 for it. The engine and transmission, it's an early 283 with 461 camel hump heads. I paid $800 for the whole engine, transmission, even like it's got a $300 low car shifter on it. Paid $800 for the whole works. Would I normally put an automatic in a hot rod? Not really. In fact, this is the very first hot rod I've ever built with an automatic. But going back to that super low dollar, simple, basic hot rod thing, that's why it has an automatic in it. So anyways, that's the story on the Third Wave Roadster, how it's got its name, what its purpose is. So yeah, that's let's I don't know what we're gonna do on it next. It's been 3 months since I last worked on it, and I don't exactly remember where I left off. I think I was doing Wishbone mounts. Also in the last couple months, all the swap meets we've been hitting, I've got some parts for it now. I've got a couple different valve cover options. I've got windshield stanchions now. I've got a windshield for it. The box I've had for a while now. It's just sitting in my storage trailer until I get everything buttoned up here. It'll probably be one of the last things to go on. I got a 32 grill for it. Not an original one, I think it's a Brookville one. I found it on Marketplace for 75 bucks. So yeah, obviously I'm gonna grab that. I don't care if it's Brookville. For this car, it's fine. Low dollar, that's the whole premise on this. Super low dollar, but still very traditional inspired. So anyways, there you have it. Sorry for the ramble. So I've been sitting here and I drank a whole cup of coffee, just staring at it, trying to see where I left off last, where I should pick up again. And I remembered it was the Wishbones was the last thing I was working on. Wishbone mounts in particular. So right now what is on it is, these are just like, I think they're SoCal Speed Shop split Wishbone tabs. And they work great with like a 32 Ford frame or a SoCal frame, but they don't work great with like a traditional Model A style straight frame. And the reason being is they don't hang down low enough. So we're going to build new mounts that weld to the frame and hang down lower. We need it to sit about here. And the reason we need it down here is to give our front axle, normally with a dropped axle setup like this, you want 5 to 7 degrees of caster. That's how much the axle tips back. You don't want it straight up and down because it'll drive like a shopping cart. Oh, hello, Dan. Hold on. And we're back. Dan Lowe just dropped off some stuff for his Model A Phaeton that he's building that I have to help him out with. So back to this. You don't want it straight up and down because it will drive like a shopping cart. You need your axle to lay back. That also helps the spring absorb everything. Think to like a motorcycle when the forks are on a rake like that. So when you're driving down the road and you hit a bump, the springs absorb everything as it hits. Now, if you had that straight up and down, like if your axle was at 0 degrees caster and you hit a bump, instead of your forks absorbing everything, they're just going to fold back like that. It doesn't work. You need 5 to 7 degrees caster. Another way you can do it without building drop mounts like this is, if you did want to use these, you can always pie cut your wishbone and run it up on an angle. I personally prefer to keep the wishbone parallel with the frame, just because I think aesthetically it looks nicer when you stand back and look at the whole profile of the car. All the lines are the same. You don't have a straight frame and then a wishbone on an awkward angle. So let's build that. I've kind of got the jack mocked up where it needs to be. If we take this angle finder over here, I've got it set at 7 degrees. So when we put it on there, sorry, it is, oh, it's not at 7 degrees. Okay, bear with me here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that is 7 degrees right there. So I just lifted it up and down with the jack until I got my height. And we'll build some tabs now. Okay, I just drew up this simple little bracket on Fusion 360 here so that I can cut it out like this on the CNC plasma. Now, I realize not everybody has Fusion 360 and a CNC plasma at home, but this is very easy to make at home with a hole saw and just a zip disc and some 1/4 inch plate. Clean the ends up. The only reason I use the table is because I have it, so why not? Isn't that thing so cool? This is my favorite tool that I think I've ever bought. The only thing I wish it did different is when it was done cutting the piece out, it would go ding like a little toaster oven. That'd be just the icing on the cake. These are cut out. Pretty straightforward. This is where the tie rod end goes. This area up here, that's the frame rail area, so it'll get welded all the way around there. And then I cut a hole in the middle just to do like a rosette weld in the middle. Now you're probably wondering why I cut such a big hole for the tie rod to go through. That's way too big. Notice these guys have a little hole and they got this little bung in there. That bung is tapered because the tie rod end tapers. That is probably pretty easy to make on a lathe. I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm not a machinist, but I'm assuming it's probably a pretty easy piece to make on a lathe. I don't have a lathe, but I have these old spindle steering arms that I don't even remember what they came off of. I think they came off my 47. Anyways, these little ends are tapered for an early Ford tie rod because obviously the tie rod end goes in there. Now I have cut this hole big enough so that I can cut this out and take this little round bung and it will go inside like that. Now it doesn't quite fit perfect. There's a little bit of a gap around there just because this isn't perfect, but it is close enough for what we need to do. This one, the end got schmucked on it, but we can make it work. It won't be a deal breaker at all. These ends, these tie rod ends, they can thread in and out. So with that being a little bit, like this one's not quite perfectly centered when it goes in there, we can compensate for that by threading that in and out dial. Basically, you're just gonna like take a measurement from like the front axle to the back axle and dial it in until you get it nice and true and straight. Super simple, straightforward stuff. Make it straight. I know some people will stress out over that not being straight. The thing you got to remember, or that I like to remind myself when building traditional styled hot rods, like if this was a hot rod that a kid was building in the 60s, an 18-year-old kid building this in like 1958 or 1962, he doesn't care about that. He just wants like a loud, obnoxious car to like go have fun with. So don't sweat the little stuff. We're trying to like, building traditional hot rods, you're trying to like replicate what like teenagers were doing in the 50s. They don't have to be perfect.
That all cleaned up, it drops right in there, real nice. That little gap around there, that's no big deal. We can just weld that up. Filler with Miller, as they say. You can actually, because this is like a little bit oblong, we can kind of manipulate it a bit to get it pretty close to straight. All right, those are all welded up. I think it turned out pretty good. I welded the back side as well. Now we can go fit them on the car. I think we're going to have to unbolt the body and slide it back a bit just so that we can get in here to weld them up properly.
All right, let's see how these go. Shannon and I just moved the body back, so we got lots of room. Just gonna loosely put that on, hold it up here, about like that. Actually, I'm gonna move my clamp over here. That way I can get this guy in there and make sure wow, that was really good. We're like bang on. Okay, there we go. I'll tack this side and then match it on the other side. Measure to make sure it's in the exact same spot, and we should be able to weld them up. And we're done. Okay, this side's 26 3/4. And we'll double check that this side is 26 3/4. So we got them front to back. They are good. Put our little straight edge on there, and we're square this way. So we're ready to tack them. I'm just going to tack them with the MIG right now, mainly because my TIG is almost out of gas, and I don't think I have enough gas to fully weld that. So rather than drag the whole thing over here to weld 3 inches and then run out of gas, I'm just going to tack it. I'll get gas another day, and there's a bunch of other things underneath that still have to be welded. So when we blow it all apart for the final weld, then we'll take care of it then. But this will be fine for now. Speaking of gas, I didn't even turn the gas on. So just pretend that didn't happen. There we go, that's better. Okay, we got 3. That tack doesn't count. It's got to get cleaned up and done again. But that'll work for now. Go to the other side. Beautiful. So I think with this all in here, I'm gonna build a gusset to go in here. I don't know if it really needs one. I see a lot of hot rods that don't have them. I mean, it is 1/4 inch and all the force is going this way, not this way. So I don't know if it needs one or not, but I mean, it'll only take 2 minutes to cut that out on the plasma table, so might as well.
Ooh, hot potato. That should work pretty good. Both those gussets are tacked in place. They're probably not going to stay there. I'm going to knock them out when I go to final weld this because I want to put a bead right through here. And it's considerably easier to do that when this isn't in the way. So if basically I just tack them in there so they don't get lost. Then once it all comes apart and I final weld all this, flip the chassis upside down, and then I can weld that stuff in.
There we go. Just before Doris died, Shannon and I put the body back on. Those sit really nice. One thing I like about this is when it's all put together, you won't be able to see any of the welds at all, which I kind of like. So I got this guy set at 7 degrees, and if we put it on there, boom, perfect. How do you like that? So there you go. That is how to make lower wishbone mounts for a straight style, like Model A style chassis. Something that you can definitely do at home. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel and support the shop, please check out lgspeedcustom.com, where you can get hot rod shirts, as well as we got lots of hot rod parts. Lots of hot rod parts that we made on this car, like these shock mounts, the AV8 mounts, the LG 283 plates, stuff like that. What else did we make on this car? I'm sure there's other stuff on the website. Go check it out. You'll find something. Thanks to the Cavaleros. Go check out thecavaleros.com. Buy a shirt from them. Maybe grab a CD if you're still like old school that way and want a CD. And yeah, we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Also, thanks to Shannon, who not only helped me lift the body, but she just washed the truck inside and out. Best girlfriend ever. Anyways, see you on the next video.
Arr. Doris doesn't care.